So again, I just wanted to say thank you for coming, and Sarah, thank you for jumping in and hopefully introducing yourself there for a moment. But yeah, we are here to learn, we're here to share, we're here to celebrate, hopefully. We do like to try to keep all of this in a positive spin. We know that we're underrepresented. We know that, and that's why we're here. So we don't try to, place blame or to, the past is the past, but once we know better, we can do better. And so again, I just thank you all for being here. And I would like to introduce Sarah Driver. She's our consultant. She sort of took my breath away almost, gosh, over a year ago when I watched. And so when we decided, how would we go about implementing a network, so to speak, we thought the educational component, well, I was like, I have the perfect person. And so Sarah, if you want to give a quick, self-introduction, that would be great. And then kick us off. I know that we're going to be doing CPE credits, I believe I see, is it Farah? I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly.
Hi, yes, I'm Farah,
Farah, okay.
and I'm here with Tidwell Group, and we are sponsoring the CPE. So I'm glad that we got everything. We're lining up our tech about the same time. So I'll send out a link in the chat. So you guys, if you want your CPE credit, you can just go to the link that I'm about to post in the chat, and that will pop up. I'll pop in from time to time and have a few polling questions just to gauge your interaction and make sure. It'll be about 4 times. And at the very end, you'll just fill out an evaluation so we can learn what we can do better and what we learned from this experience. And then you'll be able to get your CPE certificate within the next few days. So thank you very much. And
thank you. And thank you so much to Tidwell Group for being the sponsor of this and offering CPE. That's just an added benefit for sure. And so we appreciate that. You do need to answer, I think, most all of the questions if you are on to try to receive CPE credit. And our goal here today, I think, is to try to shorten these to around an hour, and if possible. So Farah, is that a problem for you? Oh, technical.
Yes, the hour is good. I am, just so you guys know, this is my first time moderating and using this software and telling you to use this software. So I appreciate your patience. But when you log in, it should be pretty obvious. But if anybody has any problems finding the event, then just let me know. But
okay. You're doing great. This is a learning. Turns out this is all about learning here today. So do not worry. So yes, we'll be stopping occasionally, not only for CPE questions, polling questions, but I think we're going to change the format a little bit so that Sarah has found some points in her conversation where we're going to stop and maybe dig into things together a little bit. So again, if you have bandwidth and you can actually turn your video on and participate, that'd be great. If not, yeah, feel free to jump in as you're comfortable. So Sarah, take it away. I will not interrupt for at least 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you.
I want to make sure that we wish a very happy birthday to Millie. Today is her birthday and she's spending her birthday lunch here with us. So thank you, Millie. Happy birthday.
Thank you, guys.
Happy birthday, Millie.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm Sarah and I run Driver Consulting, which is a strategic firm focused on providing assessments and strategic roadmaps for companies that want to access the benefits of gender equality in their own companies. And we have a blast. We have conversations about all these topics that we'll cover, and we do these kind of in-depth assessments and everything. So I wanted to bring those topics to you all through these workshops. And the one that we're going to hit on today is this idea of a magic number. So a magic number, this is the threshold at which we start to access the benefits of gender equality that we talked about last month, the increased higher levels of innovation, the improved risk management, the higher growth, the higher levels of productivity. all of that comes when you reach a critical mass. Sorry, I forgot to share my screen. Let's get you some slides to look at. So the very, very, very glad to have you back. We had a blast last month, and looking forward to an even more in-depth conversation this time. So gender balance, as we said, has these big financial and organizational benefits. The catch is that you have to get to this threshold of 30% in order to start to access those benefits. And then those benefits increase as you get to 50-50. So this is within a team, for example, or within a company, within a level of an organization, or within a department. You've got to have this critical mass of both men and women in order for these benefits to kick in, and we'll talk about why. But just a little bit of a note about this. Sometimes in articles you'll read, just having a woman on a team doesn't, the data doesn't show that it improves the outcomes of the team or the profitability of the company. And that is true. It's not just having one man or one woman, a token person. It's this critical mass. And so sometimes you'll see authors that are a little bit disingenuous about that, because the research doesn't say just having a man or woman on the team makes the business case start happening. It's when you have that critical mass. So wanted to share, in addition to kind of broad studies, that some of which we talked about last month, there's this case study of Sodexo, which is a company of 400,000 plus employees in 55 different countries. And they did this massive study to look at managers across 100 different global entities to evaluate whether gender equality had an impact on these 5 particular KPIs that they chose: brand awareness, client retention, and so on. And they found the exact same thing. There's this threshold effect where once for them it was 40%. And so, 30-40% is that threshold. 30 to 40% of women above that, increases as you go up to 50%, and then it tapers off as you get, teams that are dominated again by women rather than men. So it's that balance of men and women that's really important. So we call that gender balance. So I want to ask you all, what does this look like in your companies? So when you think about the top management team, thank you, Millie, in your own company, does it have at least 30% of both men and women? Make sure you count it out. Don't just think, yeah, it probably does or doesn't. Count it out and see, okay, out of this team, do we get to 30%? Yes, it does. This is the first answer. No, it has less than 30% women, so heavier male representation. Or no, it has less than 30% men with kind of female overrepresentation. So take a minute and let's see where we all land on that. Millie, are we getting some good? Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, wonderful. So we've got half and half. So half we see, yes, we've met that threshold. We're seeing the benefits of gender equality. And then there's no place where it's overrepresented by men, but there are some where it's fewer than 30% women on the top management team. Okay, so that's really actually impressive that there's half that do reach that. That's somewhat unusual. So for those of you who are in those companies, That's a great sign of things that have been going well in the past that then we can build and grow on in the future. And for those who are below the threshold, it's probably something that you've noticed over time that women are underrepresented in top leadership teams. The reason that we focus on top management teams is that the data show that the benefits of gender equality and these gender balanced teams are highest when you have that balance represented at the highest levels of the company. So the idea with...
Sorry. Oh, I'm going to pepper in real quick and let you know that I've unlocked the first polling question on the software. So if you guys want to go on there and answer the question, what state do you currently live in? I think that would be a really interesting thing to find out and kind of think about with our 50% women and a little bit less, see where we're at.
Yeah.
And I'm getting some good responses. We're in Alabama, Georgia, and Indiana today. So thank you all for your responses.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
So the reason that we want to take last month and this month to kind of ground ourselves in this kind of making sure that we recognize gender equality in the workplace as a business imperative in addition to a social imperative. The reason we want to ground ourselves in that is because when we're moving forward with some of the initiatives that we'll talk about in later months, we're going to come up to, this is going to require some time. It's going to require some resources. It's going to require us to change in some ways. And so we want to always be able to come back to, we're doing this for the benefit of the whole company, for everyone in the company. This is not a zero-sum game where we're trying to, push women ahead and men will lose or something like that. So that grounding helps. It's something that we can come back to over and over when there's any hesitation or pushback when it comes to actually making the concrete changes that are required to really push us forward in this area. So one thing I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on as we discuss is for your teams, for the particular teams that you are on, or for your top management teams, if you're not in kind of that high management level, is this something that's ever been talked about as a goal? Is it something that you think would be realistic for those who are not already at that level, or in your own team if you're not at that level of 30% or more? Are there kind of things that have been tried to try to balance that more? Or is that just not an issue that's even on people's radar usually? I'll open it up if you want to share verbally, or if you want to throw something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm happy to comment on our company specifically is quite small. We do strictly development. We're not doing the property management, the construction, and all of that. So our team is really, really small. Now it is headed up by Mr. Bennett, who has been in the industry for probably close to 50 years, if not a little bit more. And so I think our little team here that we have, we literally, including Mr. Bennett and Ms. Rowlett, who's his partner, we only have 6 individuals here. And I almost think that it occurred that we became predominantly female-led by happenstance. It was not an intentional decision that was made by anyone, I don't think, and it's not something that we've given a whole lot of thought to until recently, really, with the advent of our state chapter of WAN, and both Anne Marie Rowlett and myself being on that board, and it's kind of brought some enlightenment to us all about that. I think in some other organizations, maybe some larger organizations, though, is where we're going to find a bigger gap, perhaps. And certainly in some of the organizations that we work with, there's a much larger gap. For our state Affordable Housing Association, as a matter of fact, Mr. Bennett sits on that board, and we've discussed it, and gender equality and diversity on that board has just simply never been really something they've addressed. It's just, they've just been doing business as they've always done business and just haven't given it a thought yet. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Wonderful. So there's room for growth, starting to be that kind of recognition of, oh, this is something we should be paying attention to.
Exactly.
And now you've got some of the data and information about how it can help everybody. And yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Cindy.
You're so welcome.
My old company that I just left, I'd never heard any conversations. Of course, I wasn't in top management. So if they weren't discussed and they weren't shared as a strategic thing with the company. So I guess my answer is no.
Yeah.
Anybody have a yes though? Anybody know of a or company?
I would say we have over 50% females in the executive leadership team at Merchants Capital. So it's really exciting to be a part of that. And I think it's something that's important to our firm overall.
Do you think that started because of, I don't know if it was the founder, but you had mentioned before.
Oh, I'm at a different firm now. I'm sorry. I was talking about my history. Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional rather than just finding the right, like the best professionals for the job.
Yeah.
I think that's always, on top of everyone's minds, just finding the best professional for the job. And, but I was happy to see that there was more than half of our staff on the executive leadership team that is female when I started. So
Yeah.
it's exciting, especially in real estate and banking and affordable housing.
I have a lot of things going again. I have a question, Sarah, and it was posed in the last session, but I don't think you were on because it was like in our facility, maybe towards the end. I think sometimes there's this fear of like, you put something like this out there and now, or it was presented in a way from this person who is not here today, but that people may just get hired to check a box and not because they're like qualified. So women may be moved up or they may be put in positions that they're not qualified for. Do you see that often, or like how would you respond to a question like that? Because I think we were all like a little like, well, I don't know. I didn't know what to say. And so wanted to get your response on that, since we're still sort of talking about this number and this mix and what it means to companies. And so.
Yes, that is huge, because you do such a disservice by putting an unqualified person in a position that they are not ready for. And I don't know if you've ever been in that position or seen someone in that position, but it just sets everything back for that person individually, because they, presumably aren't getting the coaching and the equipping that they need. They haven't had the background that's prepared them for this. So it can really impact their own confidence and feeling of, efficacy of I can do this, I can contribute. If you're drowning and you're in over your head and you under-resourced for what you're called on to do, it's a horrible feeling. And so number one, it's damaging for that person. Number two, it's damaging for the perception of the ability of that type of person to fill this type of role. So this can apply to women, it can apply to young people, old people, all kinds of different types of diversity. And so if you set someone up to fail and then they fail in the role, you just set that back so far so that people are even less likely then to try to hire for diversity in that type of position. So one of the things that we'll talk about in a couple slides is how important it is to make sure that the person is qualified, because otherwise you're setting it up for this cascade of negative impacts and setting things back. And typically, I think people who hire in that way are doing it out of either naivete or just for optics sake. And they haven't put the work in of, okay, how can we really prepare our people to succeed, make sure that we're promoting the people who are ready, and objectively measuring, not just going based off self-promotion and things like that. So yeah, I think that's a very common pitfall, and it's so hard to watch because it's just this train wreck happening, and it's like, oh, the damage that person's doing because they, and then the damage it does to them. Yeah. Any other questions or comments along that? Okay, Sarah, let's do another CPE question.
Okay, I have unlocked the next question. The question is true or false? The financing gap is an issue all states should be focused on. And I'll give you guys just a couple of minutes to pepper in your responses. Again, you can go to that link that's in the Zoom chat. And if anybody needs that link one more time, you can just let me know and I can repost it. Because every time we close out of it, it does pop back up. There it is one more time. Okay. And true, everybody agrees that yes, it is an important issue that all states should be focused on.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to dig in a little bit, Millie, to answer that question in a kind of more robust way. This 30% threshold, why is it magical? So the answer is this concept of the power of collective intelligence. And this is so fascinating. It was completely off my radar. I never knew about this. And it's really shifted the way that I think about this topic. So the finding from this research, and it's been ongoing, is that it's better to have a diverse team of competent people than a homogeneous team of the best and brightest. Okay, so isn't that fascinating? That is not how I thought about it before. I thought about it as you hire the best, and if they happen to be one or the other, demographic, then, that's what it happens to be, but we've got to get the best people for the role. And what the research has found is that this collective intelligence trumps the average intelligence of the individual team members, if that makes sense. So we have these different perspectives and different backgrounds that are leading to better decision making and better problem solving, et cetera, which leads to better outcomes. And that is even if the individuals are not the stars from the talent pool. If we hire for, again, making sure we have the competent, they've reached the level of being able to do the job effectively, as long as they can do the job, then you start to think about how do we hire for, meeting this threshold is one very concrete way. As we talked about, and you really do want to make sure that they are truly qualified, but you hear people say we've just got to hire the best talent, and that is not really true in the terms of getting the best outcomes for the company and the team. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because this just blew my mind when I learned it, and I'd love to hear how it hits you. If you feel like you've seen this in action, if you've heard this before yourself, and how would this shift how we hire and promote and manage people?
Especially for who we represent, the people who live in affordable housing are very diverse. And so to have diversity so that you have just all of the perspectives, all of the even maybe cultures represented, or like things that a homogenous, maybe single gender or single ethnic, or like just wouldn't be able to creatively perhaps, or understand what might be needed or wanted, or what would be most impactful for the residents that we serve. So I guess I envision that being sort of especially important in affordable housing. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I would imagine you guys have a diversity of ages, genders, disabilities,
True.
you know, all those things. If you
All
have,
of it.
yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it's not just, you know, are you going to get a gadget that works for you, but housing, you know, like such a critical thing that's impacting such a range of people.
I also was thinking when it says on here, you know, we have to just hire the best talent. And I think we hear that a lot. And I think that that is a driving force in hiring for a lot of companies. It's like, I can't be bothered with checking boxes. I've got to get the best people in here. But what I personally think is that sometimes what I read into this is that sometimes you're saying, I need to have the most experienced person. I have to have the person with the most education. And that's not necessarily always beneficial. I come also from a hospitality background where one of the things that in that arena that we dealt with was sometimes you just have to have the right personality. You can teach, you can coach, you can mentor, you can train if you have someone who has the right personality, which is probably not even the right word to say, but you know, have all of those other components. They can connect with people. You can tell that they have empathy or that they're, you know, very positive and uplifting and things that you want to be sort of the face of your company and your organization. But it does mean that on the back end, as the employers, as the managers, we have to do a little more work on our end to teach them the day-to-days, the details, etc. So that's kind of how I look at that.
Yeah. So that kind of gets into what are we screening for and what are we putting on job descriptions, excuse me.
Yes, yes.
So
I've shared this story a couple of times that when I first started working in affordable housing, I responded to a blind ad that literally said, looking for someone who is self-motivated, highly organized to assist owner of a company. So and so I went in basically, you know, with my day planner and everything else and said, give me a task, give me a checklist, I'll make it happen, you know, and the rest I learned. I had no idea what affordable housing was. I had no idea what a tax credit was and whatnot and stuff. And I just feel really fortunate. It seems really odd that they would run such a generic ad, but it worked. It worked for our little company anyways, you know, because they knew the type of personality that they needed in that slot. And then, you know, they were kind of like, okay, now that you're here, this is how we kind of want you to use that skill set and improve upon it. So
yes, yeah, here's the core of what we know you need, and then we can build from there.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting just along those lines is that a lot of times, you know, job descriptions have this long list of requirements and, you know, and then you have another list of like nice to haves and stuff. Well, if that list is too long, you start scaring away people. And especially women are more likely to not apply for a job unless they meet every single one of the criteria. And men,
Absolutely.
yes, whereas men, if they meet half the criteria, are going for it. Like, yeah, close enough. And so as people who are writing job descriptions, we've got to make sure that it really is just the critical components of what's required for the job that's on there so that people will not self-select them out of even applying for the job in the first place. And that's a great example.
Yeah, it worked for us a couple of times because Miss Rowlett, we ran that same blind ad and we got her, and now she's the co-owner of the company and our COO. So it worked out.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so interesting. What a great example.
Just to echo Cindy's comment, Sarah, about you could teach people, but you just have to have the right personality. I interviewed 2 yesterday. I'm trying to hire for my team, grow And, one of the things that I asked the recruiters to actually add to the job posting was about flexibility, especially for mothers and females. And I'm also starting to add something as to, you don't necessarily have to have your CPA license to work for my team, because there's females who become mothers and they didn't have 18 months to sit down and study for the exam, right? So that does not mean they're not qualified for the job. They don't know how to do the job. It's a certification. It's a valid one. It's a great one. But that does not mean they don't have the drive, the initiative to learn, work, and lead a team. So that's been something that I've been adding to all my job postings, because it doesn't, also the flexibility of time. I don't really need my team to be working from 8 to 5. Yes, I expect them to, get the job done, but go do laundry if you need to. You've got kids, you've got to pick up. So that's something even when I'm interviewing, they ask me what's the time frame, the job, what's expectation. At the end of the day, what I tell them when I'm interviewing is like, as long as you get your job done in time, deliver, meet deadlines, that's all that matters.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. And to say it explicitly so people don't have to wonder or guess. So you say it explicitly on the front end so people know, okay, this is something I could do. Especially with COVID, obviously, women have been dropping out of the workforce right and left. And so to be able to offer that proactively and not wait until someone asks for it or, needs it, or just that is a wonderful example. And saying this qualification is a nice to have, but you don't need to, because that fewer women are able to access that qualification once they have children. Those are all great examples. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, let's do another CPE poll.
All right, the next poll question is unlocked, and it is true or false. I am ready for football season and fall. Okay, let's see what everybody is ready. I don't know if I'm fully ready for football season, but I'm here for the pumpkin spice and the cozy sweaters. So
Definitely. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we've got 2 big sections left of information. I want to make sure I time it as well as we can to be able to cover it all. So we have this humongous benefits of diverse teams, but there's a caveat. Diverse teams are harder. They're harder to be a part of, and they're harder to manage. So you can kind of think of like the diverse team members as kind of the raw materials of this collective intelligence that we talked about, that is, giving us all these benefits. But we need to have new skills, new practices, new habits that help us to put those raw materials together and then access that collective intelligence. So if you have a diverse team where the minority members do not share or do not feel comfortable expressing things that are hindering their work or making them uncomfortable, you are not accessing that collective intelligence. So what are some of those things that once we shift, then we can manage and our groups can become places that foster this collective intelligence? So first thing is, are we willing to change the way of doing business to accommodate different styles, different perspectives, all those raw materials that are going to get us to where we want to be? what do we need to change about how we do business, rather than saying, okay, person, in our case, woman, here's how our team works. If you want to succeed, you're going to have to act how this team has always acted. And, that usually doesn't lead to high levels of retention. So even if you meet that 30% threshold, you may not stay at that 30% threshold for very long. So one example of this is a culture of, kind of self-promotion, or you got to speak up and push your way to the forward, to the front. That's a particular type of personality that is comfortable doing that. And then particular types of personalities that can kind of be pushed in that direction and encouraged and mentored and coached in that direction. And you have certain personalities and cultures where that will not happen, and they're not comfortable with that. So then we need to shift our group habits, skills, and practices to asking better questions, to listening better. It takes more work. It's more proactive. You can't just sit back and wait for people to come. You've got to be out there in different ways. But this is really, really important shift in doing business. Instead of, saying, if you're here, you've got to fit into our mold. Another one is sometimes in groups of people where we're not used to having them in our groups, it's kind of can be awkward. It can be frustrating. We can start to develop kind of negative assumptions about the group or the person that has ways of doing things that are really different from what we're used to. And so part of developing new and better group habits, skills, and practices is developing the habit of asking questions that feel like they would be obvious, because they're no longer obvious. And that's the collective intelligence is bringing new perspectives, new backgrounds. And so we're going to have to be asking questions about things that we hadn't considered before, and a culture that is oriented around and expecting and encouraging. Let's ask another question. Let's ask the next question. Really helps to develop that openness to be able to access the collective intelligence like we want to do. And then the third, kind of quick thing we can do is there's tons of research out there about how groups work. And for example, we know that women in group meetings and group settings are interrupted more often by both men and women. So what can we do? Part of what we need to do is just to surface and discuss that so that people are aware of it. And then we need to, talk about, like, we need to check ourselves when we're about to interrupt someone. Don't interrupt them. Also, as a group, when someone is being interrupted, what's a way that we can step in and say, I want to hear what you're going to say, but I think that she was just interrupted, or he was just interrupted. Let's let him finish and then we'll get off to you. We want to make sure we hear both people's contributions. And so just discussing those openly and brainstorming ideas and finding ways that work for your context and your team, that's a huge, huge step forward. So I would love to hear those kind of things are just like the day-to-day little practices and shifts that we can make that really add up over time. I'd love to hear if you guys have seen these practices, if you have seen them go well, if you've seen the lack of them and the impact that has about just being expected to fit into a culture without the culture being willing to shift to the new people who are there. And just your kind of thoughts about this, like, and reactions to it, to help us all process if we need these new skills to be able to access the collective intelligence, what does that kind of mean for how we in our day-to-day lives are going about those communication and interaction?
I'll start off because I did not fit the mold. um, I've had a lot of negative experiences in different roles, not just the role that I left, but certainly, being interrupted, or I was even shushed one time. Does anybody else? I know, look, I was shushed, and I was like, and it sticks with you, you know what I mean? To have that sort of treatment. But I was very lucky to have a great ally in my last position that changed the game, quite frankly, because he would give me credit.
Yeah.
He would, when he could tell that maybe someone wasn't listening to me, or they weren't really taking, me seriously, or whatever. He would actually sort of repeat what I said, but he would start off by saying, I think what Millie is trying to say, or Millie just said, and he would just always give me credit, which anybody do for me before. I'd had people steal my ideas or say the same thing I just said like 5 minutes ago, but all of a sudden it's like, I'm sure you've all experienced something similar. You just need more of this. So if you see something like that happening, I guess, just know that you have that power too, to be an ally for other women. Or it might not even be a woman. It might just be another person that's sort of being ran over or ignored or shushed or all of those things. So I guess that's just my experience. But I think until we have these conversations, we kind of point it out and we tell people like, you can sort of step in and change the dynamic. Yeah, so make it a safer space for everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. There's things that we need to change system-wide, and then there's things that we can just take it upon ourselves to start to do for other people. And you can even, kind of talk to another safe person on your team and say, if you see this happening to me, will you say something? And if I see it happening to you, I'll say something. And those are really, really powerful shifts.
Well, do you ladies find that when those things happen, because apparently Millie has stolen my life and we experienced several of the same things. I think sometimes what happens is then you can only experience something like that for so long or so many times, and then you just shut down. And then you're not a productive member of the team. And then that goes to where they're like, see, here we were trying to do this and now it's not working. She doesn't cooperate, So yeah, I mean, it can be a tough situation to be in for sure.
Yes.
Oh, I did shut down. I was like, I think what you're looking for is a Stepford worker.
Good for you.
There were moments, but it really, for me, I think it goes back to like the personality, some of that stuff. But when you have the right number of people, there's a balance there. And then when you have allies, by the way, we have a awards nomination for Active Allies right now on National One. So if you have an amazing ally like I have had, consider nominating them, because it's hard, Cindy. It really is. It just wears on you. It's like, why do I need to change? Like what?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I've seen it happen. I mean, I've been in situations where I feel like, okay, well, I'm just going to be quiet, And then of course there are other times when I'm, feeling a little more rowdy and continue to push the boundaries. But I also see it happen to other folks. I've been in situations in meetings with other people and seen it, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging for the team as a whole, I think. And then you're not really getting the creativity and the sharing of thoughts and ideas that you really do need, I think, to be successful.
Yes. Bingo. Bingo. You nailed it. Yeah. Kind of hits again on how when we start to make these shifts to promote and improve gender equality, we end up leveling the playing field for everyone. So we'll make those same interventions on behalf of a young or an old person, or on behalf of an underrepresented cultural or racial group member, or, you know, all of these things. As we become more objective and more proactive, it benefits everyone. And also in the case, you know, related to gender, to men who don't fit kind of the stereotypical, you know, role of like the brash or whatever, you know, anybody who doesn't fit the mold in whatever way, these practices are helping to level the playing field for everyone. All right, let's stop and do another CPE poll.
Thank you. Next question is on loss, and it's a yes, no. I learned a lot today and would like another session to build on this conversation. So go ahead and answer that. Feel pretty confident that yes, we are all interested in learning a little bit more and continuing this conversation, having another session. So
Well, we have one last section. Thank you for that, Farah. One of the ways, you know, with my work with companies, I'm always working to get as nitty-gritty as possible. And one of the ways that we do this is to measure, just go through and measure the data on gender balance. The reason we do these measurements is we cannot rely on our perceptions and impressions of how diverse our workplace is. Our impressions as humans are very often wrong. And so one study that Lean In reported on said that 45% of men reported women being well represented in situations when only 1 of 10 senior leaders were women. Okay, so they look around the room, they see a woman like, yep, check. And so there's 2 things here. One is that, you know, they're probably not aware of, it's not just a matter of having 1 woman or 1 man in the room. We've got to meet this threshold, have this critical mass. But number 2, just, you know, this kind of, if we go with our impressions, perceptions, we're not going to address a problem that we think we don't have. So when we can actually collect the data about our company, about our teams, that gives us something concrete to say, okay, here's where we are. We're measuring, we're getting concrete numbers. And this is a huge, huge piece. I want to get into the details because it's so critical, and there's important ways to look at and slice the data in different ways. So there's 2 types of data that we can gather and track. One is vertical gender balance. So as we look at the layers and levels of the organization, do we have at least 30% of both men and women across all these levels? As we go up the org chart, do we have still, you know, between 30 and 70% of both men and women at all those levels? Are we getting closer to 40 to 60%? You know, some people kind of get intimidated by like, well, we're never going to be able to get 50-50. That's not the point. The point is to get above these 30 and 40% thresholds. So measuring it that way in your company. And then there's a horizontal piece. So across your teams and departments, HR, marketing, finance, you know, whatever the different teams and departments are within your own company, are there departments that are female heavy or male heavy within the company? Gender balance is both that vertical and horizontal pieces, and you want to measure it that way. An important thing is you want to measure it for where you are today And then if you have historical data and you can look at, okay, how have we been trending? Are we heading in the right direction? A lot of times we're heading backwards. So we need to know, where are we, on a dynamic basis, not just where we are today. And then setting time frames for, okay, every year we're going to measure all the vertical, all the horizontal, and see where we are. So this allows you to get a snapshot of your company. It allows you to pinpoint, here's our problem areas. Finance is, all male, and HR is all female. We got to do something about these two departments. Or we're doing well in middle management and with our associates, but we are male heavy in the top management and female heavy in the, admin side levels. That allows us to pinpoint, okay, for these levels where we already have the raw materials of collective intelligence that we talked about, the diverse team members, are we doing the management habits and skills, practices that we need to access the collective intelligence there? And for those levels where we do not have those sufficient raw materials to reach 30%, what can we be doing to improve our pipeline? And so, the pieces in terms of pulling people in who don't have the particular certifications that, they could get while they're with your company, or, talking with people at universities, looking at the pipeline as well as the promotion practices. And we'll talk about these in later sessions. Look at your retention rate by gender. So are you hiring people at these various levels or in these various departments, and then they only last a year or two? Look at your retention rates by gender. All these data are so important to gather and track, and it will tell you so much about what's happening, what can be improved, where it needs to happen. And it's really fascinating data. When I pull this out for companies, it's almost always surprising, and people are, they kind of knew, okay, we needed more women in leadership, but I didn't know that, we only had half of our departments that were balanced and had met this threshold and things. So it's really, really important. And there's a horizontal piece that impacts the vertical piece. So when you're looking at top management, a lot of times those will come from particular departments, tend to come from particular departments. You get promoted into a VP role from these 2 or 3 departments. Are those the male heavy departments typically, or are they the more balanced departments? So those are all those kind of dynamics that you can pull out of this data. It's fascinating. It's practical. It makes it concrete for people. So it's not just, I think we have enough women in leadership. I don't. Here's what the data says. Here's where we are in comparison to this data. And if we want to access these benefits, here's what we need to address. Is the end of the presentation. I would love to hear your thoughts on that data piece, because it's so critical. The data itself is simple enough. Yes or no, 30%, or, tracking the percentage. Are we at 30? Are we at 40? Are we at 20? Are we at 10? Are we at 0? It's simple enough, but it paints such a powerful picture. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. If that feels like something that would be doable for you and your company, if that's something that you think your leadership would be open to, tell me what your thoughts and questions and comments are.
I think, Farah, did you have anything else on CPE stuff? I think we finalized that, right? And we might have lost some of our folks already
Okay.
at 1 o'clock.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the evaluation button should be available now at that link. And this is the part that I'm least confident about. So if somebody who is on the other end of this page can just confirm that they see an eval button,
The evaluation button was there. I've actually been able to complete it and go ahead and submit it. So
Perfect.
it's
I know.
working.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Patience with
Thank you, Farah, and thank you to Tidwell Group for sponsoring this and doing the CPE. It's terrific. It's a nice added benefit, as surely. Did anybody have any comments then or questions for Sarah? If not, I can stop recording if folks want to stay on for a few more minutes and do that. But I want to just formally thank Sarah for her time. Thank you all for joining us today, having these conversations. Hopefully you took something away, something you can share, something to take back to your leadership, to mention, and we're going to continue to have resources up on our website. We'll be building this thing out, building the network over time. So, and love your feedback. If you want to send me a direct message, I'll actually put my email in the chat. If you'd like to just give some feedback on the format of this presentation, time, shorter, longer. I think an hour feels good, but would love your feedback. So if anybody else has any other comments, I'll stop recording here.